All right, so today we're diving into the future of weather forecasting. And with the climate changing and things getting less predictable, well, knowing what's coming in terms of weather is more important than ever.
Definitely.
And that's where this thing called Google DeepMind's GenCast comes in.
Right.
And it's this new AI model that's, well, it's making waves because it could revolutionize how we predict the weather, from daily sunshine to those crazy storms, up to 15 days in advance. So we've got research and articles here on GenCast, and we're going to break it down into 16 key facts.
Great.
So are you ready to start?
Absolutely. Let's jump right in.
Okay, so first up is speed. GenCast is seriously fast. And get this, it can make a forecast in about 8 minutes.
Wow.
While traditional weather models, those can take hours.
Hours, yeah.
Imagine getting a tornado warning way faster. I mean, that extra time could be life-saving.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. It really shows how practical this technology is. The traditional models rely on so much computing power to, work through complex physics equations. But GenCast takes a totally different approach. That speed difference could really be key for, getting those alerts out in time to people who are, right in the path of danger.
Yeah. All right, fact number 2. And this one kind of blew my mind. GenCast uses something called a diffusion model, which is normally used for creating images, not predicting weather. I mean, it's like using a paintbrush to write a novel.
It is pretty wild, right? So imagine traditional weather forecasting as trying to put together this giant puzzle, all based on physics. Well, GenCast flips that whole idea on its head. Instead of focusing on the equations, it learns from looking at tons and tons of historical weather data. So it's like showing a computer millions of pictures of weather patterns and then just letting it figure out the connections on its own.
So it's all about the data, not the equations. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that brings us to fact number 3, and this one's all about the data. GenCast basically lives and breathes data. It just devours tons of historical weather info to make predictions.
Exactly. And that's how it's able to pick up on those subtle patterns that traditional methods might completely miss. It's like having this superpowered detective who can go through decades of weather reports to find those little clues.
Now, fact number 4, and this one's especially for those of you in hurricane areas. GenCast is amazing at predicting those tricky tropical cyclone paths.
That's right. Tropical cyclones are notoriously hard to predict. They can just change directions so quickly. But GenCast seems to have a knack for it, especially with Typhoon Hagibis, which, the closer it got, the more accurate the predictions got. Imagine how impactful that would be for, getting people prepared for a disaster.
Okay, get ready for fact number 5. This one's really cool. GenCast doesn't just give one prediction. It creates like 50 different possible scenarios.
Yep.
So it's like you've got a whole team of meteorologists all giving you their best guesses all at once.
Exactly. And that's what we call ensemble forecasting. And it just gives us this way more complete picture of what the weather could actually do, especially those extreme events. It's not just about, what's the most likely thing to happen. It's about understanding all the possibilities and how uncertain things really are.
All right. Fact number 6. And this one's about how GenCast stacks up against, well, the best in the business. We're talking about the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, also known as ECMWF.
Yeah.
And they're like the rock stars of weather forecasts.
They're definitely considered the gold standard. They are the ones to beat when it comes to accuracy.
And in head-to-head tests, using real weather data from back in 2019, GenCast actually outperformed the ECMWF 97.2% of the time.
It's amazing.
It's wild. And it gets even better. Fact number 7. For predictions further out than 36 hours, GenCast's accuracy jumps to 99.8%. I mean, that's almost perfect.
Pretty incredible.
Think about planning a barbecue or, a big outdoor event. If you had that level of confidence in the forecast,
it would make things a lot easier. That kind of accuracy, especially for long-range forecasts, that's where GenCast really shines. Think about industries that depend on weather predictions, like agriculture or transportation. They could make way better decisions and, maybe even save a lot of money.
Okay, fact number 8, and this one's a biggie, especially with, climate change making extreme weather, well, more extreme. GenCast seems to be really, really good at predicting those intense events, the heat waves, the cold snaps, and, as we said before, those tricky cyclones.
It really is a critical ability, especially because we're facing a future with, more and more of those extreme weather events. Accurate predictions, well, they become even more important, to protect people, protect property, and just stay safe.
Okay, fact number 9, and this one might surprise you. GenCast isn't here to replace our friendly neighborhood weather forecasters, at least not yet.
Not yet, no. A lot of experts see it as a really powerful tool, to work alongside the existing forecasting methods, not to replace them completely.
Right.
It's all about, working together. Just imagine combining the power of AI with the experience and, the insights of human meteorologists. I mean, that's a recipe for even better, more accurate and reliable forecasts.
Absolutely. And speaking of working together, well, fact number 10 shows just how impressed even the best in the business are with GenCast. Remember the ECMWF, those rock star forecasters?
Right.
Well, they're incorporating some of GenCast's features into their own systems.
That's a big deal. It really signals that the whole field of meteorology, well, they're embracing the potential of AI. It's not just some fringe technology anymore. It's becoming a core part of how we understand and predict the weather.
Now, fact number 11 gives you a little peek behind the scenes at who created this amazing AI. GenCast was developed by Google DeepMind, and they're the same brilliant minds behind AlphaFold, which, if you remember, is the AI that just totally revolutionized how we understand proteins.
It's true. DeepMind, they have this real knack for tackling those really complex scientific problems. And GenCast is another example of their amazing expertise. It's exciting to see AI being applied to all these different fields and, changing how we do things.
Okay, fact number 12 is all about how GenCast learns its weather predicting magic. It was trained on a massive data set of weather data. And this data was from 2017 to 2019.
Yeah, and that's really just the beginning. I mean, as GenCast gets its, virtual hands on more and more data, its predictions are only going to get better and better. It's like, think of a student who just keeps studying. They get smarter over time.
Right.
GenCast is the same way.
Now, before we get, too carried away, it's important to remember that the research on GenCast is, it's still pretty new. So fact number 13, the paper that explains all the details of GenCast, it was published on what's called a preprint server.
Right. And that means it hasn't gone through that rigorous peer review process yet, where other scientists in the field really, carefully examine the research to make sure that it's all good and valid. So while the results are super promising, we have to keep that context in mind.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about, how incredible GenCast is. But to really understand, how different it is, let's take a quick look back at how traditional weather forecasting works. Fact number 14. Traditional forecasting is all about those high and low pressure areas, those swirling winds, and something called the beta effect.
That's right. Traditional forecasting really relies on understanding all those complex physics of the atmosphere. I mean, it's like trying to solve this giant puzzle that's always changing. And, they're using equations to try and model how air masses move, how those clouds form, and how all these different factors interact. So the beta effect, that's one example. It describes how the Earth's rotation actually influences the path of storms.
So you've got all that complexity. And then GenCast comes in with its data-driven approach, cutting through the noise, making predictions with crazy speed and accuracy. That's fact number 15.
Yep.
And it really highlights the big shift that's happening in meteorology.
Exactly. GenCast really does represent a completely new way of thinking about weather forecasting. Instead of relying only on those complex equations, it uses the power of AI to find those patterns and make predictions, all based on this huge amount of historical data.
And remember how we talked about GenCast being a superstar when it came to predicting Typhoon Agibus's path? Well, here's a really fascinating detail that adds to how impressive it is. Fact number 16, its predictions for that typhoon actually became even more accurate as the storm got closer, which is, absolutely critical for getting those timely evacuation warnings out.
Yeah, that's so crucial for disaster preparedness. Being able to accurately forecast the path of a storm, in those critical hours before it makes landfall, that can make all the difference in saving lives and reducing the damage.
So we've just laid out 16 key facts about GenCast, which is, Google's pretty amazing AI for predicting the weather. Now let's kind of shift gears a bit here and think about what all of this really means. So we've looked at the how of it all, but now let's dive into the so what.
Right. The ability to predict the future, I mean, even if it's, just the weather, that has some really big implications. Just imagine a world where we could actually anticipate and prepare for things like storms or heat waves or floods with, this crazy level of accuracy. It could completely change how we deal with disasters, how we plan our infrastructure, and even how we live our daily lives.
It is mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah.
But with all this, predictive power, there's also a huge responsibility, right? I mean, we need to really think about the ethical implications of this technology. Like potential biases
Yeah.
and making sure that it's used to benefit everybody.
Absolutely. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about how we use it. We need to make sure that it's accessible, that it's equitable, and that there are safeguards in place, to prevent it from being misused. These are the kinds of conversations that we need to be having as a society. And it's got to involve everybody, the scientists, the policymakers, and just everyday people.
Yeah. It's like we're stepping into a whole new era, a brave new world of weather prediction. And it's kind of thrilling, but it's also a little bit scary, don't you think?
Definitely. It's a reminder that every time we make one of these big technological leaps forward, we got to stop and really think about what it means. What are the bigger consequences? GenCast, it isn't just about predicting the weather. It's about predicting the future that we want to create.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with something to really think about. So imagine a world where we can not only predict the weather with, this amazing accuracy, but we can actually use that knowledge to fight back against climate change, to protect communities that are really vulnerable, and to just, create a more sustainable future for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really powerful thought. I mean, GenCast is really just a glimpse of what that future could be. A future where AI can help us not just understand the weather, but also understand our planet as a whole and understand where we fit into all of it.
All right, so we're back. And we've spent, a good chunk of time talking about GenCast. This AI that's, it's shaking things up in the world of weather forecasting. We've gone over, how it all works, what it could mean for things like, disaster preparedness, and even what it could teach us about climate change.
It's been a fascinating discussion. We've really delved into the core facts about GenCast, haven't we? Explored what it could mean for the future, all those possibilities.
Exactly. And now as we wrap up our deep dive here, we got to tackle the big question. What does GenCast's amazing predictive power, what does that mean for all of us, for society as a whole? Are we ready for a world where AI plays, such a huge role in our lives?
It's a really important question to consider, and one that we need to approach carefully, thoughtfully. Like any powerful technology, there are some incredible opportunities here, but also, potential risks. We have to weigh both of those.
Right. On the one hand, GenCast gives us this incredible view into the forces of nature. It has the potential to, save lives, protect property, and just help us make smarter decisions about, managing our planet's resources.
Exactly. Just imagine a world where we can predict and prepare for those extreme weather events with, this incredible accuracy. We could evacuate people from hurricanes, way before they hit, strengthen things like, infrastructure before floods happen, and even start taking steps to, to lessen the impact of things like heat waves on people who are especially vulnerable.
It's a future with a lot of promise.
Yeah.
A future where technology can help us live safer, healthier, more sustainable lives. But I think it's important, to be real about the potential downsides as well, right?
Of course. We have to be mindful of the ethical side of things, the possibility of bias creeping in, and the danger of becoming too reliant on AI. We got to make sure this technology is used responsibly, fairly, that it helps everyone, and doesn't make those existing inequalities even worse.
Yeah, we can't just blindly jump into the world of AI without thinking about how it might affect things like, our values, our freedoms, our relationship with nature itself.
You're absolutely right. We need to have those open, honest discussions about the role we want AI to play in our lives. And we need to set up, some safeguards to make sure that it's used ethically for the good of everybody.
So as we close out our deep dive on GenCast, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. GenCast is really just one example of how AI is changing things, super fast. It's up to all of us to keep up with these advancements, to ask the tough questions, and to really shape a future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Absolutely. The future isn't something that just happens to us, It's something we build, one choice at a time, one innovation at a time. One conversation at a time.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Sure.
And that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into GenCast. We hope you learned something. Maybe you're thinking about some things you hadn't before. and maybe you're feeling, a little bit inspired. Until next time, keep your minds curious and those skies clear.